President Trump to introduce trade tariffs on Canada and Mexico is fast closing. China has expressed a desire to import Canada's natural resources, including oil. Since Canada's Trans Mountain pipeline expansion was completed in May, a tanker load of oil sands from the line has flown beneath Vancouver's Lion Gate Bridge, nearly daily route to refineries in the Pacific. For Canada, which had been busy exporting massive oil flows only to the United States, bound for China and Japan, represented a significant change. The Canadian people would pay less than half of the taxes, and President Donald Trump's tariff threats underscored the dangers of this reliance. However, Canada will see what happens. The $34 billion Trans Mountain expansion's success stoked Canada's ambitions to become more independent of its volatile neighbor and to have a greater say in the world's oil markets. By exporting Canada's oil resources, China was fiercely vying with Japan for all of Canada's oil reserves. The Beijing regime intended to bolster the divide between Washington and Ottawa and increase its own reserves, but Canada surprised Japan by taking action against China over the shipping of energy resources like LNG and oil. Now we'll examine in greater detail why Canada selected Japan over China in its tax dispute with the US and talk about the ramifications for the global economy. To stay up to date with our content, please remember to subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and like our posts. Now, let's return to the subject at hand. The province of Alberta, due to tariff threats from the US administration, Canada's oil and natural gas producing province, is searching for alternate energy export routes and wants to sell Canadian LNG to Japan. Yes, you read correctly. In the lead up to the imposition of US tariffs, Canada is turning to Japan rather than China. Alberta's natural surroundings and protected areas. In Tokyo, Minister Rebecca Schultz has been holding meetings with trade and industry groups to talk about Canadian energy exports to Japan. The significance of Canadian LNG for Japan's energy security was underlined by Schultz. It is evident from these remarks that Canada will complete its first LNG export project to Japan this year. Schultz also underlined that as Japan shifts away from coal, dependable LNG from Canada will lower emissions and improve economic ties between the two nations. Canadian officials claim they have been compelled to increase the volume of their exports out of concern for various tariffs, and they attribute this to US President Donald Trump's tax policies. Eventually, the Alberta-Japan route for LNG and other energy exports is significantly shorter than the US Gulf Coast Japan route, demonstrating Alberta's geographic advantages over the US, Schultz said. Additionally, according to Schultz, the province currently poses less geopolitical risk than the US. He notes that Alberta is developing 4 or 5 projects to increase its export capacity. Japan is happy that Canada has selected it. China. The director of Japan's Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry's Energy Resources Development Division, Yuya Hasegawa, stated during meetings this week in Tokyo that they anticipate receiving LNG resources from Canada. The Chinese side passed up this crucial chance. Since the Beijing regime depends on oil and gas supplies, the fact that Canada's new customer base includes Japan rather than China shocks the Xi regime. In particular, the fact that the LNG agreements between Canada and Japan were reached the day after the contact with China is likely to impress X even more. According to diplomatic and economic experts, Canada will export liquefied natural gas to Japan at 0% tariff, and we're going to find out who they are and remove them. We also have illegal immigrants and other people as Alberta tries to increase its attractiveness in Japan. This weekend, US President Trump is scheduled to meet with Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru to discuss potential Japanese backing for a proposed $44 billion LNG export project in Alaska. If the Ottawa government agrees with Tokyo on LNG and other energy resources, it might be too late for that. What are the significant losses that the United States stands to lose in these areas? The United States' energy reserves are strengthened by Canadian exports of electricity and gas, which also reduce consumer costs and help the US achieve its objectives of increasing international energy exports to allies, the Deep Norths, and the South integration of North America. Energy infrastructure means that, even though Canada is a net exporter of natural gas and oil, diversification efforts outside of it will be expensive and time-consuming. The United States wants to meet rising domestic demand in order to assist Europe and allied Asian nations in reducing their reliance on less friendly energy sources. There are plenty of American reserves, but energy-intensive data centers using artificial intelligence and other technologies are putting a strain on available capacity. Canada's steady energy production could help supply the US through integrated pipelines and grids, which would allow the US to export natural gas and oil to its allies around the world without raising prices for domestic consumers. If tensions between the US and Canada hadn't recently flared up, this would have likely been the strategy for the two nations' energy relationship and one of Trump's top priorities. Over the past few decades, Canada has increased its share of US crude oil imports to 24% of US oil consumption. Cross-sea pipelines delivered heavy crude oil directly to US refineries that were specifically built to process it. For these refineries, particularly those in the Midwest, moving away from Canadian heavy crude could have exposed them to geopolitical risks that would have resulted in high re-regulation costs or increased reliance on alternative sources like Venezuela or the Middle East. Although the United States produces the majority of its own electricity, the recent crisis has strengthened Canada's ties with these nations. The United States also lists electricity as one of its losses. In a number of U.S. states, Canadian sources keep the lights on, and the price is low. 20% of New York City's electricity needs are intended to be met by new projects like hydro, Quebec's Hurdle New York Power Line. With more than 30 cross-border transmission lines linking Canadian provinces to U.S. states, residents will save an estimated $17 billion in electricity costs over the next 3 decades, while also increasing electricity exports. Canada is crucial for maintaining the security of the cross-border grid and as a possible source of incremental generation. Data centers are expected to make up as much as 12% of all U.S. consumption by 2028, up from 4.4% in 2023. However, a tariff dispute in the near future could derail all of these U.S. plans. However, Canada asserts that its impact will be less severe than that of the U.S. In the short term, Canada must urgently realign its economic interests with the United States. The United States can manage on its own, but the path to self-sufficiency will be more difficult, expensive, and time-consuming. This is the rationale behind the Canadian government's claim that it is seeking new relationships in Asia. It is believed that there is not much time to persuade Washington of the necessity of cooperation in the resource and energy sphere, which has been weaponized by a number of non-allied actors. This strategy is largely dependent on the United States joining the alliance in 3 crucial areas of mutual benefit due to the shifting economic and geopolitical environment. The NDP made new election pledges yesterday to impose tariffs on Tesla electric vehicles in order to reinstate the federal EV rebate and double the rebate, demonstrating that Canada too needs to organize its internal affairs. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh during a campaign-style tour of Windsor, Ontario, Canada's automotive capital, if customers buy a plug-in car made in Canada. Singh informed reporters that the new Democratic federal government would impose a 100% trade tax on all Tesla products if Trump fulfills his threat to impose tariffs on all Canadian goods. Billions of dollars will be needed for new infrastructure, such as ports, railroads, and domestic and international processing facilities, as part of a resource-driven economic and trade strategy. In a dramatic shift in global energy dynamics, Canada has announced plans to redirect its natural gas exports away from the United States, opting instead to forge a new partnership with Japan. This decision, touted as a strategic move to diversify export markets, has sent shockwaves through the U.S. energy sector and has profound implications for the burgeoning electric vehicle (EV) market. We are announcing a pivotal decision to realign Canada's natural gas exports to meet the growing demands of our strategic partners, starting with Japan. The announcement came amidst rising tensions over energy policy and climate goals between Canada and the United States. Experts warn that Canada's shift could lead to a significant reduction in natural gas supply for the U.S., affecting industries heavily reliant on affordable energy sources. The U.S. energy sector, already grappling with supply chain disruptions and regulatory challenges, now faces a potential setback as it adjusts to the loss of a key energy source. This move could have far-reaching economic implications, impacting everything from manufacturing costs to consumer prices. Economists predict that increased competition for natural gas supply could drive up prices domestically, further straining inflationary pressures in an already fragile economic environment. Canada's pivot towards Japan signals a broader trend of shifting global energy alliances as nations seek to secure stable and diversified energy sources amid geopolitical uncertainties. With natural gas prices potentially rising, the cost of electricity generation could increase, impacting the affordability and adoption of electric vehicles. The EV market, poised for exponential growth, faces new challenges as it navigates the implications of Canada's energy export decision on electricity prices and infrastructure development. We must reassess our energy policies and strengthen domestic production to mitigate the impacts of Canada's realignment. In Washington, lawmakers are divided over the appropriate response to safeguard U.S. energy security and support the transition to sustainable energy solutions. As Canada embarks on a new energy export strategy, the global energy landscape continues to evolve, presenting challenges and opportunities for nations, industries, and consumers alike. Rising natural gas prices. The U.S. relies on Canadian natural gas for domestic energy production. A reduced supply would increase competition, driving up prices. Supply chain disruptions. Industries dependent on natural gas, such as manufacturing, chemicals, and power generation, could face shortages or increased costs. Greater reliance on domestic production. The U.S. would have to ramp up its own gas production, likely leading to increased fracking and environmental concerns. Shift in energy trade relations. The US might have to turn to other suppliers like Qatar or Australia to make up for the shortfall. Higher electricity costs. Since natural gas is a key energy source for power plants, a price increase would make electricity more expensive. This could slow down EV adoption, as consumers and businesses hesitate due to higher charging costs. Slower charging infrastructure expansion. Rising energy costs might impact government and private sector investments in EV charging stations. Impact on EV manufacturing. Car manufacturers use natural gas for production processes. Higher costs could result in increased EV prices, reducing affordability. Stronger Canada-Japan ties. Japan would secure a stable and reliable LNG supply, reducing its dependence on the Middle East and Russia. Increased LNG demand from other countries. As Canada pivots to Japan, other Asian nations like South Korea and China might seek similar deals, reshaping global energy markets. Potential U.S. response. The U.S. could attempt to counter Canada's move by offering Japan competitive LNG deals or investing more in domestic gas infrastructure. Inflationary pressure in the U.S. Increased natural gas prices could contribute to higher inflation, affecting consumers and businesses. Policy shifts and trade tensions. The U.S. might impose tariffs or renegotiate trade deals to counter the loss. Energy security concerns. With energy geopolitics shifting, the U.S. may need to rethink its strategy for securing energy resources. If Canada redirects its gas exports from the U.S. to Japan, it could destabilize the U.S. energy sector, drive up electricity costs, impact EV adoption, and shift global energy alliances. The U.S. government and businesses would need to act swiftly to minimize disruptions and secure alternative energy sources. Canada has strong automotive trade ties with both Japan and the United States, but their dynamics differ significantly. Here's a breakdown of their car, import, export relationships, and how a shift in energy trade might affect them. Japan exports a high volume of vehicles to Canada, including brands like Toyota, Honda, Nissan, Mazda, and Subaru. Canada does not export many vehicles to Japan due to Japan's domestic production capacity and strict regulations. Japan's top exported vehicles to Canada include the Toyota RAV4, Honda CR-V, and Mazda CX-5. Canada imports Japanese cars mostly as fully assembled units, although some models, like the RAV4 and Lexus RX, are manufactured in Canada for North American markets. Strengthened Canada-Japan relations. If Canada supplies more LNG to Japan, Japan may reciprocate with more investment in Canadian auto manufacturing or relaxed trade policies. Japanese automakers could expand in Canada. Toyota, Honda, and Nissan may increase production in Canada, creating more local jobs. Canada's car exports to Japan. Unlikely to rise. Japan remains a challenging market due to high domestic competition and stringent import regulations. Canada and the U.S. have a highly integrated automotive supply chain due to the USMCA, United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. Canada exports around 80% of its car production to the U.S., mainly from Toyota, Honda, Ford, GM, and Stellantis, Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge. Top exported vehicles include the Toyota RAV4, Honda CR-V, and Ford Edge, all built in Canada and sold in the U.S. The U.S. exports fewer vehicles to Canada, as most American-built cars already serve the local market. Potential impact of the gas trade shift. Tensions in U.S.-Canada trade relations. If Canada prioritizes Japan for LNG exports, the U.S. might retaliate with stricter auto trade policies. Higher costs for U.S. automakers in Canada. Rising energy costs could make vehicle production more expensive, leading to potential price increases. Canada could strengthen trade with Japan as a backup plan. If U.S. trade tensions rise, Canada might look to deepen its automotive ties with Japan. Japan exports many cars to Canada, but Canada exports very few cars to Japan. Canada and the U.S. have a deeply integrated auto trade, but a shift in energy relations could create tensions. If U.S.-Canada tensions rise, Canada might look to Japan for more automotive trade, potentially attracting more Japanese auto investments. Canada maintains robust automotive trade relationships with both the United States and Japan. Here's a detailed overview of the trade values on annual, weekly, and daily basis. Exports to the U.S. Approximately $45.4 billion USD in vehicles and automotive parts. Imports from the U.S. Approximately $53.31 billion USD in vehicles and automotive parts. Breakdown of imports from the U.S. 2022. Passenger vehicles, $17.76 billion. Goods, transport vehicles, $15.38 billion. Parts and accessories, 10.80 billion trailers and semi-trailers, 3.54 billion tractors. 2.87 billion. Canada maintains a diverse and robust network of international trade relationships, engaging in significant economic exchanges with countries worldwide. Here's an overview of Canada's key trade partnerships and recent developments. The United States stands as Canada's most significant trading partner, with a deeply integrated economic relationship. Trade volume. In 2024, the total goods trade between Canada and the U.S. was approximately $762.1 billion USD, with Canada exporting $349.4 billion USD worth of goods to the U.S. and importing $412.7 billion USD. Recent developments. As of February 2025, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau emphasized efforts to prevent the U.S. from imposing tariffs on Canadian imports, highlighting the importance of maintaining tariff-free trade between the two nations. The European Union, EU, is another vital trading partner for Canada. Trade agreements. The Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, provisionally applied since 2017, has bolstered trade between Canada and EU member countries. Trade growth. CETA has facilitated increased exports and imports, enhancing economic ties and providing Canadian businesses with greater access to European markets. China represents a significant and complex trade partner for Canada. Trade relations. While China is among Canada's top trading partners, the relationship is influenced by broader geopolitical considerations. Critical minerals. Negotiations to end the war in Ukraine have highlighted the importance of critical minerals, with U.S. trade tensions involving China and Canada bringing these essential elements into focus. As a fellow member of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, Mexico is a key partner in North American trade. Integrated supply chains. The USMCA facilitates seamless trade and investment flows, supporting integrated supply chains across the continent. Recent challenges. Proposed tariffs on imports from Mexico and Canada, including a 10% rate on Canada's energy imports, have raised concerns about potential economic impacts and the risk of recessions in both countries. Canada actively pursues trade diversification through agreements with various countries and regions. Free trade agreements, FTAs. Canada has established FTAs with nations such as Peru, Panama, and Ukraine, and is engaged in ongoing negotiations with others, including Mercosur member countries, Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay. Foreign Investment Promotion and Protection Agreements, FIPAs. These agreements aim to protect and promote foreign investment through legally binding rights and obligations. For detailed and up-to-date statistics on Canada's international trade and investment activities. Statistics. Canada provides comprehensive data, tools, and reports on Canada's trade performance. Global affairs. Canada offers insights into trade agreements, export, import guidelines, and investment opportunities. Canada's international trade relations are characterized by strong ties with traditional partners like the United States and the European Union, strategic engagements with emerging markets, and a commitment to diversifying trade through various agreements. These relationships are pivotal for Canada's economic growth and resilience in the global marketplace. Canada and Europe share a long-standing and multifaceted relationship characterized by deep historical ties, shared values, and extensive cooperation across various sectors. This partnership encompasses political collaboration, robust trade and economic interactions, and joint efforts in addressing global challenges. The relationship between Canada and the European Union, EU, is founded on a mutual commitment to democratic principles, human rights, and the rule of law. This bond has been formalized through agreements such as the Strategic Partnership Agreement, SPA, which enhances collaboration on international peace and security, climate change, and scientific research. The SPA reflects a shared vision for a rules-based international order and underscores the importance of multilateralism in addressing global issues. Trade between Canada and Europe has flourished, particularly following the provisional application of the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, in 2017. CETA has facilitated the reduction of tariffs on a wide range of goods and services, leading to a significant increase in bilateral trade. As of 2024, the EU stands as Canada's second-largest trading partner, with bilateral trade reaching approximately $100 billion annually. This economic partnership not only boosts commerce, but also promotes investment and job creation on both sides of the Atlantic. In February 2025, Canadian Trade Minister Mary Ung visited Brussels to strengthen commercial ties with the EU amidst ongoing trade tensions with the United States. Discussions with EU Trade Commissioner Maroš Šefčovič focused on optimizing the benefits of CETA, facilitating market access for businesses, and supporting small and medium-sized enterprises. Additionally, both parties explored collaboration in critical minerals and infrastructure projects aimed at exporting energy resources to Europe. Furthermore, in January 2025, Canada and Poland signed a cooperation agreement to advance nuclear power initiatives. This agreement provides a legal framework for collaboration, with Poland selecting Westinghouse Electric, owned by Canadian entities, to construct its first nuclear power plant. This move aligns with Poland's strategy to diversify its energy sources and reduce coal dependency, while offering Canada an opportunity to export its nuclear technology expertise. Despite the strong partnership, challenges persist. In February 2025, the United States imposed tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, affecting both Canada and the EU. This development prompted Canada and European leaders to criticize the move, expressing concerns over potential global trade disruptions and emphasizing the need for a coordinated response to protect their economic interests. Looking ahead, Canada and Europe are poised to deepen their collaboration in areas such as renewable energy, technology innovation, and global security. The evolving geopolitical landscape presents both challenges and opportunities, reinforcing the importance of their strategic partnership in promoting stability and prosperity on the global stage.